Have you ever felt unseen, unheard, or inexplicably alone, even in the presence of your family? Ever struggled with relationships that seem one-sided or emotionally draining? In this video, we're diving into Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay C. Gibson, a powerful book that reveals how emotionally immature parents shape our inner lives and how we can finally begin to heal. Whether you're seeking answers about your childhood or tools to break free from patterns holding you back, this book could be your roadmap to self-discovery and emotional freedom. Let's begin the journey toward understanding, healing, and reclaiming your emotional life. Understanding emotional neglect. Imagine this. A child walks into a home where meals are cooked, clothes are clean, and everything seems fine on the surface. Yet that child carries a quiet, gnawing ache, a feeling that no one really sees or hears them. This is emotional neglect, and according to Lindsay C. Gibson, it can be just as damaging as physical deprivation. Gibson opens the book by challenging a deeply rooted assumption that all adults are more emotionally mature than their children. She proposes a startling idea. Some children are born emotionally sensitive and perceptive and may outpace their parents in emotional maturity early in life. When emotionally immature parents can't meet their child's emotional needs because they fear real intimacy, avoid vulnerability, or lack empathy, the result is a profound and invisible wound: emotional loneliness. These parents are not necessarily cruel or negligent in the obvious ways. In fact, many of them go through the motions of parenting, ensuring their children are fed, clothed, and safe. But they withhold something critical: emotional presence. They might flinch from deep conversations, change the subject when feelings surface, or become irritated when their child seeks comfort. Their children, in turn, internalize the belief that their emotions are a burden. Gibson likens this to the recurring themes found in fairy tales and myths. Stories of children abandoned by clueless or cold parents, left to survive with the help of magical creatures or their own wit. These tales reflect a timeless truth. Emotionally immature parenting isn't new. It's been with us for generations. Through this lens, Gibson invites readers to explore not only the pain of being emotionally unseen, but also the healing that begins when we name the experience. By identifying emotional immaturity for what it is, we stop blaming ourselves and start reclaiming our emotional world. Chapter 1. How emotionally immature parents affect their children. In this chapter, Gibson paints a vivid picture of what it feels like to grow up emotionally lonely. Children raised by emotionally immature parents often experience what she calls emotional loneliness, an internal emptiness that no amount of physical care can fill. These children may live in safe homes with their basic needs met, but they are emotionally starving. Their parents do not tune into their inner lives. They might dismiss their feelings, interrupt them when they try to speak, or punish them for expressing vulnerability. Two client stories illustrate this phenomenon with heartbreaking clarity. David recalls his home life as feeling like he was floating alone in the ocean. His family members lived parallel lives under the same roof, each emotionally isolated. Rhonda remembers standing with her family during a move, surrounded by people, but utterly alone because no one acknowledged or explained what was happening. The emotional distance was deafening. Gibson explains that emotional intimacy, the sense that someone is genuinely interested in your thoughts, feelings, and experiences, is as essential to human health as food and shelter. It's what makes us feel connected, safe, and real. When parents are emotionally mature, they instinctively offer this to their children. But when they're not, their kids grow up believing their needs are too much. Such children often try to win connection by becoming helpers, peacemakers, or high achievers. They learn to suppress their feelings, prioritize others, and appear low maintenance. But these coping strategies often lead to even more isolation. As adults, they may find themselves in one-sided relationships, still hoping to earn the love and attention they never got. The chapter ends on a powerful note. Healing begins when we understand that our emotional emptiness is not our fault, It's the natural response to a lack of genuine connection. Awareness becomes the first step toward change. Chapter 2. Recognizing the emotionally immature parent. Recognizing emotional immaturity in our parents can be painful, even guilt-inducing. Many of us are taught never to question our parents' behavior. But Gibson insists this isn't about blame, it's about clarity. Emotionally immature parents often display a common set of traits. They overreact to minor stressors. They lack empathy and emotional awareness. They avoid emotional conversations. They become defensive or angry when challenged. They see relationships in black and white terms. Gibson provides a self-assessment checklist to help readers evaluate their own parental experiences. Questions include: did your parent become sarcastic when you were upset? Did they expect you to listen to their problems, but never listen to yours? Did they demand agreement and get irritated when you had a different opinion? Perhaps most tellingly, emotionally immature parents are not reflective. They don't examine their behavior or consider how it affects others. If you try to explain how something hurt you, they'll often respond with defensiveness or dismissiveness. For them, intention matters more than impact. Importantly, emotional immaturity isn't the same as a temporary lapse in judgment. We all have bad days. What distinguishes emotionally immature people is the consistency of their behavior. It's a personality pattern, not a momentary regression. Recognizing these patterns isn't betrayal. It's truth-telling. And truth, Gibson argues, is what sets us free. Chapter 3. Experiencing a relationship with an emotionally immature parent. What does it feel like to live with someone who is emotionally immature? Chapter 3 is where Gibson gets intimate with this question. She describes the child's experience of constantly walking on eggshells, of never knowing what kind of reaction they'll get. Emotionally immature parents can be unpredictable, warm one moment, cold, or explosive the next. They often need to be the center of attention, even in moments that should belong to the child. This dynamic leads to what Gibson calls emotional role reversal. In role reversal, children are expected to act like the parent, offering support, keeping peace, and suppressing their own needs. One woman, Frida, describes how her father expected admiration from her despite being abusive. He wanted praise for his accomplishments and even gifts, as if he were the child. These relationships are emotionally draining. Even when the parent isn't actively abusive, the child ends up exhausted by the one-sidedness of the bond. They may dread interactions, feel guilty for not doing enough, or feel like they owe their parents something indefinable. The emotional result? Chronic guilt, confusion, and a haunting question: why do I feel so unhappy when my parents says they love me? Chapter 4. The 4 types of emotionally immature parents. To help readers better understand their family dynamics, Gibson introduces 4 distinct types of emotionally immature parents. 1. Emotional parents. These parents are overwhelmed by their own feelings. They're dramatic, reactive, and often use their child as an emotional dumping ground. They want support, not connection. 2. Driven parents. They are perfectionists, hyper-focused on achievement, and obsessed with appearances. They may push their children to excel, but fail to emotionally engage with them. Love is conditional, based on performance. 3. Passive parents. These parents don't want conflict. They disappear emotionally when things get hard. They may be kind, but are ultimately unreliable and emotionally unavailable. 4. Rejecting parents, cold, critical, and distant. These parents often view children as nuisances or burdens. They may openly express contempt or disinterest. Each type injures their child in specific ways. Emotional parents leave children feeling overwhelmed and responsible. Driven parents create perfectionistic, anxious adults. Passive parents breed insecurity and abandonment fears. Rejecting parents instill deep self-doubt and unworthiness. Recognizing which type you had, or still have, is a huge step toward understanding why you feel the way you do in your adult relationships. Chapter 5. How different children react. Children exposed to emotionally immature parenting don't all respond the same way. Gibson outlines 2 primary personality adaptations. 1. Externalizers. These children act out. They blame others, avoid self-reflection, and often repeat their parents' behavior. They struggle with emotional regulation and frequently have turbulent relationships. 2. Internalizers. These are the thoughtful, sensitive children. They internalize the chaos, believing it's their job to fix things. They become hyper-responsible, emotionally self-sufficient, and eager to please. Internalizers are often the ones who find their way to therapy, self-help books, or healing practices. They strive for growth, but carry an invisible weight, the belief that their needs are too much. Gibson explains how internalizers adopt subconscious roles, like the good child, the fixer, or the invisible one, in an attempt to win love or avoid rejection. These roles persist into adulthood, showing up in relationships where the internalizer overfunctions while others underfunction. The tragedy? These coping strategies, once necessary for survival, now block true connection. The same behaviors that once earned safety now keep love at arm's length. Gibson ends this chapter with a powerful insight. Healing begins when internalizers realize they no longer have to play these roles. They can reclaim their true self, the one who was lovable all along. Chapter 6. The Internalizer Personality. This chapter is dedicated to the internalizers, a group of people who are especially prone to the long-term impact of emotionally immature parenting. Internalizers are often deeply introspective, conscientious, sensitive, and naturally empathetic. They tend to think before they act and are acutely aware of others' feelings, often prioritizing the emotional needs of those around them over their own. Gibson explains that internalizers develop coping mechanisms early in life to handle emotional neglect. Since their emotionally immature parents were not available or attuned to their feelings, internalizers grew up believing that their own emotional needs were inconvenient or shameful. As a result, they learned to suppress these needs and instead focus on becoming what others wanted them to be. Key characteristics of internalizers. They are self-reflective, often blaming themselves when things go wrong. They avoid conflict and feel responsible for maintaining harmony in relationships. They experience guilt and anxiety when asserting their needs. They derive their worth from being helpful, compliant, or competent. They often feel drained in relationships without knowing why. These individuals often struggle with people-pleasing tendencies, perfectionism, and a lingering sense of guilt. Even in adulthood, they may unconsciously gravitate toward emotionally unavailable partners or recreate dynamics that mirror their childhood. Deep down, internalizers hold on to a fantasy that if they can just get it right, their emotionally distant loved ones will finally show them the love they've always craved. Gibson highlights the paradox. Internalizers, despite being emotionally intelligent, often fail to apply that intelligence inward. Healing begins when they learn to treat themselves with the same care and understanding they've always extended to others. Chapter 7. Breaking Down and Awakening. There comes a time in the internalizer's life when their old coping strategies no longer work. This chapter is about that breaking point and the new beginning it represents. For many internalizers, life becomes an exhausting cycle of giving, accommodating, and suppressing. Over time, they begin to experience symptoms such as depression, anxiety, chronic fatigue, or a vague sense of emptiness. These are not signs of weakness, but signals from the psyche that something needs to change. Gibson describes this breaking down as a psychological awakening. It's a moment of realization where the internalizer can no longer deny their own unhappiness. They may look around at their seemingly successful lives and wonder why they still feel lonely, angry, or numb. They may finally admit that they're deeply unfulfilled in their relationships, especially with parents, partners, or friends who continue to ignore their emotional needs. The stories shared in this chapter illustrate the transformative power of honesty. One client realizes she has spent her life trying to earn love from her emotionally distant father. Another finally stops blaming herself for her mother's coldness and begins to grieve what she never had. This chapter emphasizes that awakening requires grief. Internalizers must mourn the emotionally nurturing childhood they didn't receive and let go of the fantasy that their parent or partner will one day change. Only then can they begin to reconnect with their true self, the self that has always deserved love and care. Chapter 8. The Maturity Awareness Approach. Now that the internalizer has awakened to the truth, they need tools to navigate the emotionally immature people in their lives. Gibson introduces the Maturity Awareness Approach, a practical, empowering framework that helps internalizers protect their emotional well-being. The approach is grounded in one central idea. You can't change emotionally immature people, but you can stop expecting them to be different. This mindset frees internalizers from a lifetime of disappointment and confusion. Key steps of the Maturity Awareness Approach. 1. Assess emotional maturity. Look at people's patterns, not their words. Are they self-reflective? Do they take responsibility? Can they handle emotional closeness? 2. Observe, don't engage. Emotionally immature people feed on emotional reactivity. Don't argue or explain. Stay neutral and factual. Step back emotionally. 3. Release unrealistic expectations. Let go of the fantasy that these people will change. Stop trying to win their approval or love. Accept their limitations as permanent. 4. Set firm boundaries. Decide what you will and won't tolerate. Say no when needed. You don't need to justify your boundaries. Your peace is reason enough. 5. Refocus on self-growth. Reclaim the time and energy you once spent trying to manage other people's emotions. Invest it into your own healing, hobbies, and relationships that are actually reciprocal. Gibson emphasizes that emotionally immature people may never validate your experience, and that's okay. With the Maturity Awareness Approach, validation comes from within. You stop needing others to change and instead create your own emotional safety. Chapter 9. Living free of roles and fantasies. After releasing expectations and setting boundaries, internalizers begin to experience a profound sense of liberation. This chapter is about reclaiming your identity, free from the emotional roles you were forced to play. Most internalizers grew up performing for approval. Maybe they were the good child, the peacekeeper, or the fixer. These roles served a purpose in childhood, but become emotional prisons in adulthood. As long as internalizers cling to these roles, they remain disconnected from their authentic self. Gibson invites readers to let go of these outdated scripts and the fantasies that fuel them, particularly the fantasy that their parent will change or that love must be earned through sacrifice. Letting go of this hope is painful, but also freeing. It allows internalizers to stop trying to get water from a dry well and instead build a life on their own terms. Signs of freedom from emotional roles. You no longer feel obligated to manage other people's emotions. You make decisions based on your own values, not guilt. You enjoy solitude and peace without feeling like you're failing someone. You set boundaries without shame or endless explanations. One of the most touching stories in this chapter is of a woman who removed a porch swing her father had gifted her, a swing that took up too much space on her deck, just like he had taken up too much space in her life. Removing it became a symbolic act of reclaiming her space, both physically and emotionally. Chapter 10. Finding Emotionally Mature Relationships. The final chapter offers hope and direction. Now that internalizers understand emotional maturity and how to protect themselves from emotional immaturity, they can begin to build new, fulfilling relationships. Gibson outlines the traits of emotionally mature people. They take ownership of their actions. They communicate openly and respectfully. They show empathy and genuinely care about your experiences. They listen without interrupting or dismissing. They are consistent and emotionally reliable. These people don't need to be fixed. They are ready for mutual connection. But finding them requires internalizers to stop playing their old roles. You must meet them as your true self, not as the over-functioning, approval-seeking version of you. Gibson reminds readers that becoming emotionally mature themselves is just as important. This means honoring your feelings instead of suppressing them, speaking up even when it's uncomfortable, noticing when you're slipping into people-pleasing patterns, asking for what you need without shame or apology, walking away from relationships that drain your spirit. The message of this chapter is beautifully simple. You deserve emotional safety. You deserve to be seen, heard, and valued, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. If you've ever felt alone, emotionally drained, or confused about your relationships, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents offers clarity, compassion, and hope. This book doesn't just name the pain, it provides a path forward. Through understanding, self-reflection, and new strategies, you can break free from the emotional patterns of the past and build a life of genuine connection and emotional maturity. Thanks for watching. If this video helped you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. Your emotional healing journey starts now, and you don't have to walk it alone.